Kimberly Akimbo fans. Annie Morrison here. It's been a while since I've done anything on any social media, and that's because I've been living my life. I forgot to inform you about it. I got really fascinated by talking to our crew on this Broadway national tour of Kimberly Akimbo. Because I've never really seen any footage anywhere of what a load in and a load out for a traveling touring company goes through, what the crew has to do. Now, I've known they've set up cameras so you can watch in a quick time a set being put in, but you don't really get to see all the moving parts of it. The best I can do is very crudely interview each of the crew of Kimberly Akimbo on this national tour, because I want to know their perspectives and their roles of putting in a show and putting it back out again. And let's just have some fun. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this crude interview.
My pleasure.
As I've been saying, I'm so fascinated in the load in and load out of each crew member, because it's a component that no one's really been able to do a documentary on. It's such a huge machine. And how would you, it would have to take months to really do it.
Sure, there's a lot of moving parts.
There's a lot of moving parts. So I thought, well, at least we can talk about it. So tell me a little bit about what your job is on the show, and then let's look at how you load in and load out.
All right. Well, as a crew swing, depending on the show, my role could change. But on this show, typically what that means is for the load in and load out process, I am helping wherever I'm needed. And since we are a well-oiled machine at this point and we want things to remain consistent, that means that I typically I help in the same areas pretty much every time. And those are areas where either it's a big project for that department and having an extra person touring with the show who knows all the ins and outs is extremely beneficial. Or it's a place where multiple departments interact. For example, in the orchestra pit is a great example.
Right.
You have props and audio and even electrics setting up or plugging in the music stand lights. Right. And so, having one person who can be in that location who is involved and knows at least a little bit about each department just really helps the flow. It helps things keep moving. However, an important part of my job is also to be able to fill in if something were to happen to one of our crew members, whether they were sick or, there was some other unexpected absence. So you wouldn't want the crew swing to have an essential role on their own,
right,
because otherwise you might end up in a situation where now you actually are short-staffed,
right,
and you've adapted to having an extra crew member in a way that maybe isn't always going to be the case. And that certainly came out of the COVID pandemic and coming back to work the first season after that.
Right.
You found that a lot more shows had a lot more shows had crew swings where that wouldn't have been the case prior to those working conditions, where you had the increased potential for someone to not be able to come into work that day.
Right.
The show must go on, so therefore we must adapt.
Right. So you have to be extremely talented, because you have to be able to know all the aspects of all the jobs to go into. Like helping someone put their wig on, or
sure, yeah,
pushing on a piece of the set.
I would say that as much as talent comes into play, being willing and able is almost just as good. Certainly I'm not an expert at everything, and I don't think anybody expects me to be. Some shows that have crew swings have multiple crew swings that can focus more specialized on each department. So they might have a props and carpentry swing, and a lighting and audio swing, hair and makeup swing is one example, and wardrobe. Hair, makeup, and wardrobe swing. For shows that don't need all that, then they'll do their best to find somebody who can fill as many roles as are needed. So that is absolutely a challenge of my job, is that there's some things that I'm asked to do that I excel at more than others.
Right. So when it's time to load in a show, and talk to me what your role is now, because you're the swing, so
Yes.
you are not just if you were props, it would be a very specific thing, but you're swinging. So
Yes.
how does that affect, let's talk just loading in a
So
show.
yeah, so just breaking it down, the first thing that we do is start unloading the first trailer. And so
How many trailers are there?
there are 5 trailers.
Okay.
And the first trailer, while we do designate them sometimes by department, it's more about the majority of what's on that trailer and not necessarily everything. So, while we might call the first trailer the rigging trailer, it does have the chain motors that we need to begin hanging immediately so that we can start hanging the lighting truss from there. It also has power distribution for the audio and electrics racks so that they can begin setting those up. It has scenic hampers that contain some of our folded drops so that carpentry right off the bat can begin tying on those drops onto those battens and start doing. So there's going to be enough for each of those, at least those 3 departments, lighting, audio, and carpentry. And you can kind of count rigging as a sub-department of carpentry for all of them to begin working. Props won't have anything on that first trailer, but they have a lot of things that they can do right off the bat, just in terms of getting a tour of the venue. I mean, for a lot of time, for all of us, we're walking in the door for the first time that morning. So, there's definitely a lot to figure out. And the head carpenter especially has a lot to follow up on and make sure that all the things that he's been communicated about or to are accurate.
Head carpenter is kind of like the stage manager of the crew.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
the
exactly.
overseer of everything.
He's not just the head of the carpentry department, he's the head of all departments, and the technical effort of getting the show loaded in and open on time.
Right.
And then also loaded out and transported to the next city on time. So he, communicates with the truck drivers. He communicates with venue staff. He communicates with stage management. He communicates with all of the crew individually and department heads. Right. When I started this tour, the head carpenter was unloading the first trailer. So I've done this enough times I can see where immediately I'm going to be useful. I started unloading that first trailer because I can make sure that the truck loaders who are local are looking at this stuff for the first time. I can make sure that they're handling it safely and not going to hurt themselves or damage the equipment, and get everything off the trailer. The rest of the team is waiting for their gear so they can begin loading in. So they're right there to tell people where to bring it to and get started. So that right off the bat is the first thing I do to help out is just dive into that trailer and make sure we're unloading it and getting the whole thing started.
How early do you guys start? Is it mattered from city to city, or is it pretty much the same schedule?
It'll change. There's a sort of a default, which is an 8 a.m. start, and that's for say a 7:30 performance on that opening night. But if there's going to be some challenges that we already know in advance that will just slow us down, for example, if there isn't a loading dock, not every theater has that, then we'll start earlier. And so not having a loading dock, now you have to have a forklift, pick everything off, or we use ramps sometimes, but typically it's with a forklift for safety. For a lot of the things are heavy, and just bring them down a ramp could be unsafe. So typically everything we do on this show without a loading dock is via forklift. So that will slow down the whole process in general. So we'll start as early as 6 a.m.
Okay.
So right from there, once the first trailer is emptied, the second one we unload has got all the lighting truss on it for the electricians to begin hanging those. And so I tag out with the assistant electrician. He knows his gear more specifically. And at that point, I go onto the stage and I see what's going on. Where's carpentry at? The riggers should begin hanging those chain motors so that the lighting truss can get flown out. Carpentry is hanging some drops. The last thing that I take off of my trailer actually are the big scenic roofing truss pieces that are over your head. They make the house of the show. Each half of that, of each peak, is a solid single piece.
Wow.
And those travel on hooks on the wall of the side of the trailer. And so I do my best to keep the paint job as pristine as we can. So that's kind of come down to really all I do at the beginning to help carpentry is when they start hanging some of those set pieces. If I see some paint notes, I grab a can of paint and
So you have to travel with paint too.
We do, yeah. We got paint we travel with to maintain the integrity of the design, because when we ship this thing across the country, sometimes scuffs happen.
Yeah.
So we will repaint, and that's something I can do so that the carpenters, who are trying to instruct the team of locals to help them, don't have to stop what they're doing or saying or watching to go grab a can of paint and do that. So after hands are off it and before it gets flown out to a certain height, I'll touch up what I can, and that's a help because that roof truss you can't get to once we continue loading in the show without getting what we'd call a genie lift or a vertical mast lift. It's too tall for even ladders, really, the tallest ladders that we have set up. So it's kind of I'm trying to save time there. I'm not going to get every paint note, but a lot of it you can get later in the day. Something like that is just so much easier to get it while it's within reach before we send it out.
Yeah.
But at that point, I'm waiting for the third trailer to get unloaded entirely, and that's what we would call either the props trailer or the music trailer. It has, it's the audio trailer, and the music trailer. The props trailer is the next one because that actually has the props.
Right.
But the props department is responsible for getting the music section of the audio trailer to where it needs to go. And that's something that has been determined in advance. Usually it's going to be as close to the orchestra pit as possible. A lot of it has to go in the orchestra pit, but how you get to the orchestra pit changes from venue to venue. It's not always easy.
No.
Sometimes the only way to do it is to actually load it onto the pit lift itself, if the venue has one, and most of them do. But some don't, and some pits are actually fixed only in a lowered position, so there has to be another way to get there. And that's all some things that we tried to plan in advance that then we have to confirm will be the case when we get there. And the reason that I'm waiting for that is because I've been tapped to help with the setup of the drum booth.
Right, which is not always in the pit sometimes.
Correct. Yeah. This show has a drum kit as opposed to a different sort of orchestral percussion setup, and so the booth that we build to enclose it to help with the sound dampening around it, it can't really be, you can't change the footprint of it. So if it just won't fit in the orchestra pit, then we call it remoting it or satellite, just put it somewhere else. And then, as long as you've run the cables to the microphones, there's no real difference in how it sounds to most of the audience, because we've done what we can to try to prevent, if it were in the pit, we're not relying on that for people to hear it, in that way. So that's something that, because it's not just a big project with building the booth, that is a big portion of it. I lend my height and my strength to, and at this point, knowledge of how to construct it. I help the props department build that. And then,
is it done with clamps or?
It's really neat, actually. So I've been told that we got it from, I think, a tour of the show Wicked. It used to tour with them, and now it's come to us. Its panels are held together with Velcro strips on the side, and then sometimes people question that because they've never seen that before, and I tell them, don't worry, it's structural. But it's really the stability comes in when you put the roof pieces on, and they have a lip all the way around the edge to catch the top of it. So once everything is together, it's very safe and stable, and it's really quick to connect those wall pieces together because it's just Velcro, one strip on each side. But until you get the whole thing built, there's the potential for a wall to tip over if somebody's not holding it right. So it takes a number of hands on it, to keep it stable, and then lift the pieces off the cart that it travels on, which we had to figure out how to get to where we're building this thing, of course.
Right.
So Yeah, once that's done and the props team is able to move on to something else, usually they're going at that point to set up the rest of the orchestra pit.
Okay.
They will set up the stands and some of the specialized chairs. Well, all the chairs, some of which are specialized, I should say, for the different musicians and the instruments
How
they
are they
play.
specialized?
We have a cello chair that we travel, and our two keyboard players each have a chair that we travel with them.
What's a cello chair?
I think it's just got longer legs than your standard height chair.
Right.
I don't know. You'll have to interview the cello player, or
I'm
maybe
going to, and
one of
we
the
will.
props team
Yeah,
will be able
yeah.
to tell you more specifically.
Yeah.
But ours is great. It folds up, so we travel everything in one. I say hamper, like
Okay.
you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about, or
yeah.
whoever's watching this does. But yeah, it all fits pretty compactly, as everything has to that we travel. But they move on to do all that, and I stay in the booth, and I start running all of the microphone cables
Okay.
for the microphones for the drum kit. When our drummer comes in to build his kit, we have to install the microphones or place the microphones as he does it.
Okay.
If we come back after the fact, there's really no room left
Right.
in the, it's a
So
very,
you're really
it's an
with you.
enclosed booth.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like 8 foot by 10 foot rug
Right.
that the footprint of it mostly fits on. So
Right.
it's pretty tight. And it's actually, Frank, our drummer, and I are, I believe, the same height, which is just like a millimeter underneath the ceiling of that booth.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it really works out well. But yeah, so we do that together, and I usually communicate with Frank how we're doing on the booth building process. Sometimes he may have extra things he needs to do for the maintenance of his drums, and so he'll like a heads up if he can come in early, but he'll always ask.
So just up to this point,
Yeah.
how many hours have gone by?
Ideally, fewer than 5.
Okay.
I would say that we take our lunch break 5 hours in. So if we
Okay.
started at 8, it would be at 1 o'clock. But we're almost always going to have the booth assembled earlier than that, unless there was some sort of delay in getting it down there. Like if we had to travel things on a pit lift, we have to wait for the audio department to have completely finished building the sound towers and the center cluster array that flies out on its own truss, which is usually over that area, the apron of the stage, or what would be the orchestra pit. So it has, it has happened that we finish, like if we finish just before lunch, and then I'll let Frank know, hey, I'm going to be on lunch until 2. You can come in then. We have plenty of time to get that done.
Okay.
That's well within schedule for our load in.
Right.
Because if we have to wait on something, we're going to find something else to do in the meantime. We're going to adapt. There's a lot of different areas that we can work in. So sometimes it's happened that way, but a lot of times I'm able to get the drum kit loaded in with Frank and mic'd up before my lunch break.
Right.
Now the audio team, if they're able to, unless they got delayed somehow on the first part of their day building the sound towers and the center cluster array, they'll take a break an hour earlier. So they'll go at 4 hours in. And that way, when they come back from their hour-long break, everyone else is on their break and is out of the building or off the stage, and it's quiet.
Right.
So then they can do the work that they need to tune the room and hear the sound system in the theater, and how it's going to sound during the show. So at that point, they've already, begun miking up the rest of the orchestra pit, running the cables and, placing those. So if I come back from break and there's something I can do to help out with that, I'll do that. I kind of just jump in with audio for the rest of the day.
Your swings, you swing.
Yeah,
where you have to
exactly.
swing, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing is if carpentry or electrics, needed me in some way, I would help them there. And we've absolutely had things that needed to be repaired, because they got damaged on the loadout and we didn't have time to fix it.
Right.
And, they don't have it would interrupt the flow of the load in for them to break off and do that. So, I'll do things like that. But one way that I can always help towards the end of our load in process is just with all of the testing and troubleshooting that the audio department has to do. So I'll typically help with the instrument microphone line check. I'll just go through and make a little noise, whether it's a scratch or whatever, for our audio engineer to hear and make sure that it's all working. And, the audio assistant is typically finishing up with setting up some of the video cameras, or maybe they've got to troubleshoot that, So there's just always, it seems like, something to do in that department, so that's just where I've been able to help in.
And you have to be done by 5 o'clock pretty much with everything? Because I know we have a company meeting usually.
Yeah, so
and then the space and everything.
At 5 o'clock, company meeting, and then I think it's also pit seating, and the musicians are coming in. The musicians
do go run through their stuff, and then we come on stage for sound check.
Sound check is 5:30, and this is all assuming a 7:30 opening time.
Yes, right.
So so for me, 5 o'clock would be the latest that I would want to be working, because except for the audio team that is involved with sound check, everyone else's call time after their dinner break is at 6 o'clock. Okay. So while we could be done earlier and get to enjoy maybe a slightly longer dinner break, 5 o'clock would be the cutoff for everyone except for audio, in which case I think it would be 4.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, so they try to be done by then.
Right.
And sometimes
it doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen.
We have a rough as I heard from some people, I said, this was a rough one. The locals were not on top of it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a box of chocolates.
It's a box of chocolates.
But yeah, there's always a fix, and whether that means just somebody's going to order me some food, and I'm going to just only take a half hour, or I'm going to work through until I can eat.
What's on truck 4 and truck 5?
Oh yes, so truck 4 has the show's deck, the stage decking that we put down over the theater's stage, that everyone skates on.
Right.
So that takes up a big portion of it. Each of the roughly 4x8 panels, I think they're probably 7.5 feet, not 8 feet long.
So
but
all the rigging and else has to be done first before they can put that.
Yeah, we have to. Yeah. We call that the air show.
Okay,
everything that's overhead is called the air show, and so we'll do the air show first, and then that way the floor is clear to start laying that in. And of course, you've got to put the stage decking down before you can build any of the other structures that are attached to it.
Right.
And now some of it, like the portals that we have, which are the roof trusses and the outline of that, those will connect to the stage once we build it.
Okay.
And also on that truck are we call them barges, 3 large carts that travel all of the props for the show.
Right.
Pretty much everything that can't fit in a hamper. Small props, I think some hand props travel in the prop boxes that live on either side of the stage. Some travel in hampers. They have a few of those, but the big things, the furniture, the signage, the counters, like the refrigerator, those things all travel in the barges. And then the other thing, truck 5, forgive me, I don't have the truck packs in front of me. Truck 5 is going to have the locker and bookcase carts. There's 6 of them in the show, 2 double-sided lockers and 4, one side's a locker, one side's a bookcase. Right. So those travel in pairs on 3 separate carts that end up being pretty heavy and unwieldy. They're top heavy. The wheels that the carts travel on are higher than the height of the stage, so we can't just roll them off the stage onto the cart. There's a whole procedure that involves lifting, so that is a whole process that they have to deal with. But then of course, to be on the stage, they have to have a lower profile for their casters so that you don't see a big gap under them. That can be a problem sometimes when you're trying to get scenery, off the truck,
Right.
it's got to travel on high wheels, and then you get it onto a stage, and
Yeah.
you don't want to see. So, thankfully our show doesn't have a huge amount of things like that compared to some shows that I've worked on, but those lockers and the bookcases are definitely something you have to be careful when you're unloading them.
Right. And they can fall over on stage, as we've witnessed before.
Yeah, absolutely. It's yeah.
Also, you have, depending on the size of the theater, how far down the edge of the stage goes. Because we've also been told, be careful, you got a long way before the pit. Don't step off the stage that we've decided for our show.
Right.
That's interesting every time, too.
It is, yeah. And, and that's something that is always something that we try to consider, or I would say the head carpenter tries to consider when they're laying out the show. And this might be actually a part of the process that, is even more hidden than the load-in, is the advancing. And the local the venue staff is going to give the show's head carpenter a schematic, or at the very least a chart of measurements that explain where all of the battens are, the line sets, the things that can actually hold the scenery, and what the distance is between that and the proscenium of the stage.
Right.
Obviously, we can't hang anything past the proscenium, and so then the distance between the proscenium and the edge of the apron, that's absolutely going to vary from place to place.
What was the most difficult theater to have to scale to?
I think you should ask me that question at the end of the tour, but since I have to answer it now, well, you know what, you could definitely ask Chad, because because I don't do that for the show. And because of everything I've talked about that I end up working on, I don't always discover those challenges. I'm not the guy. Our flyman Sam would absolutely be able to answer that too, because at the end of the load-in, really you could say at the end of the load-in of the air show, but you typically don't have time to look at this sort of thing until you've moved on, you've built the deck, and you've constructed the rest of the scenery. Which, by the way, that's what's on the rest of Truck 5 is the rest of the house, the walls, the doors, that kind of stuff.
Costumes on that one too, or
yes, thank you. Yep, and then that's wardrobe and hair. Any other support boxes that we put the management boxes on the third truck. They typically are.
They have to get set up.
They got to get set up. They're typically in setting up in the office spaces in the theaters while we're doing all this on stage. But then, anything else that can wait till the end goes on Truck 5. And at the nose of Truck 5, so the last thing we pull off and the first thing we put on the loadout is the trunks, everybody's personal trunks. But I also forgot that actually brings up a great point. So that's the order that we've numbered the trucks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when we load out 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But we don't actually load in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Truck 4 has the prop barges and all that. And typically, or sometimes, Truck 4 will be the last trailer that they load in.
I see, okay.
Because of what is on Truck 5.
Okay.
And that is wardrobe.
Right.
And wardrobe needs to get off the truck and get sent to the wardrobe work areas. There's a lot of things for them that aren't just the on deck costumes, but even those, there's maintenance that needs to be done on those. And so they'll begin somewhere halfway through the day, if you compare it to where the work on stage started. At that point they've got their costumes and they can begin that maintenance. But the reason why we do that before we unload all the props is there's no place to put the props until we're done, building the rest of the set.
Exactly.
There's more to it than that that some other people can speak to. But I just thought of that.
Yeah.
You had another question, though, that you asked before that I think
it'll
about.
Pop up around again.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much the load in.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
What happened? It's all done in reverse, loading out, or is there anything that changes because of that? Because we start with the trunks and
yeah.
right.
At that point,
well, you also are you are dismantling everything as the show is going on, because that's a lot of stuff that has to happen.
yeah. So on some shows, I would say on most shows, there is a certain amount of work that you can do during the last show.
Right.
If you can get away with it quietly.
Yeah.
No, you don't want to interrupt the performance.
No, yeah.
And then a lot of times, due to different union rules, the local crew may not be permitted to do work that would be considered loadout work on what is a show call.
Gotcha.
But typically, there's no complaints about the road crew doing what they can or want to do.
And they're all the
to make everyone's life easier.
Yeah.
So we'll be told a lot, like, you can do what you want, but you can't ask your show crew locals to do anything other than the cues for the show.
Gotcha.
And then at the end of the show, there is a half-hour break.
Okay.
We've all been working for hours running the show,
yes,
so that half-hour break, that is also time that for those people who are on the show call who are now continuing on to the loadout, whether it's road crew or local crew, we'll have a catered meal.
Well, that's lovely.
Yeah, it's per our contract, basically. Right. If they're not giving us an hour break to walk away and go get our own food, then they're providing a meal for us and a half hour to eat it. But also during that time, the venue staff is probably checking in the additional locals who are coming in to help us with the loadout. Right. We need way more people to both build and strike the show than we do to run it.
Right, and that's all the men that I watch out hanging out by the trucks.
Absolutely, yep. We've also had to take some time, to get the trailers backed into position, whether it's at a loading dock or alley or street parking lot, wherever.
And sometimes the roads are closed out.
And
keeping people,
And sometimes there's not a lot they can do until the show has ended, because the crowd has to leave, the audience has, that sort of thing. So sometimes in that half hour, you're really finalizing everything you need to begin the loadout, whether it's, trucking or keeping your staff happy, or for those of us who are able to do some work in that time, as long as we feel comfortable doing it, taking apart those little detailed, nuts and bolts that just make your life easier when you go to get started and you have a whole crew of people that you need to direct to do things. So my role with the loadout is, one more thing. Obviously, things take less time loading out than loading in. But I would say the biggest difference maybe would be in the process for wardrobe, because they're the exception to that half-hour break rule. Wardrobe and hair.
Right, they got to book it.
Their loadout, it takes less time, just in the sense that they pack things back into their boxes, but they're not responsible for staying to put those boxes in the trailer.
Right. So
so they
can go home.
They load out immediately after, and then they can go back home or to the hotel, company housing or whatever. And so in that case, we, instead of starting with the props on the loadout, we start by packing the wardrobe gondolas and work boxes and the hair boxes, because they're already ready to go. Their loadout is done by the time our half-hour break is over, without exception. They're just able to do that. So that just really helps us out in clearing things out of the way. And sometimes, especially, to get those cases from where they ended up to the truck means crossing the stage, where we want to start bringing in things,
it's unsafe otherwise.
That take up a lot of space. So the quicker you can get those out of the way, the better.
So everything's almost like a choreography.
Absolutely.
Know what your role is. You know where you have to go to keep everybody safe, and it's like a dance.
We joke about it a lot, when we say that we're going to be in each other's way all night. But I think that is certainly a hallmark of an experienced crew when when people find ways to anticipate where everyone else is going, to stay out of each other's way as much as possible. I think that I feel very fortunate and grateful to the crew that I work with on this show, because I think everyone is fairly exceptional at that.
Well,
And
we're also enjoy each other.
yeah, exactly.
Everybody enjoys each other.
Because no matter
Respects each
how
other.
hard you work,
Yeah.
there's going to be moments where you have no choice but to be on top of each
Yeah,
other.
right.
So you might as well be nice to each other while you're doing
Mhm.
it. And yeah, we're all on the same team, and we're all just trying to
Yeah.
get out of there and go home and be safe and all
Wouldn't
that.
it be nice
So
if the rest of the world could be like a crew on a touring show?
it would, but it's funny because it's such a niche field
Mhm.
because it's hard to get into.
Right.
But
right.
it's hard to get into because there's fewer positions available or opportunities.
Right.
So it's just you end up working with a lot of the same people throughout the years. There's quite a number of the crew members that I work with on this show I've worked with on other shows in the past, and many of them have worked with each other for a number of shows. And you're talking about a team of fewer than 15 people, and
Right.
we all have just figured out how to make this work in the best way possible, in the most
Right.
pleasant way possible. And that's truly a blessing because it's not always that way, and it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Well, the host sets the tone.
Exactly.
The people from the top
Yeah,
are loving and kind and have a great time, so it just filters all the way down.
for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, my priority at the top of the loadout is to get those first things to the trailer. Because I'm not technically a part of any particular department, it doesn't fall on me to instruct any of the local crews on how to really do anything. So the best way that I can help is to take the team that we have. They're called pushers. Sometimes it's its own department. Every once in a while you'll meet a head pusher.
Yeah.
And honestly, that can be a
We're
blessing.
not talking dope here.
No. Nope. They're getting us the stuff that we really need, which is that to go to that trailer, and they're the people who make it happen.
Right.
We're just kind of the ones who make sure it happens in the right order, and
So every box has to be numbered and labeled right.
Yep.
And,
We have everything color coded
Right.
by trailer.
Okay.
And now not every show does it that way. I've been on shows where things are color coded by department or location that they go to on the load in.
Okay.
This show, the organizational method is it's color coded by trailer, which is very helpful on the load out.
Got it.
You can read the label and it'll tell you what is in the box and where it's going to go. But looking at it from across the room, all it's going to tell you is what truck it goes on.
Yeah. What color is each truck?
Let's see. Truck 1 is red. Rigging is red.
Of course.
Truck 2 is green. Lighting. 3, audio and music is blue. 4, props is purple.
Okay.
And 5, everything else, scenery and hair and wardrobe is pink.
That's fun.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it really helps me out
Yeah.
because, Chad, our head carpenter, will stay with the trailers right from the beginning to begin loading them.
Right.
And so what I do is I take the pushers to everywhere else in the theater that things need to come from.
Okay.
Once you get, hair and wardrobe and the things in the orchestra pit and the management boxes from the office areas out, then everything else is pretty much coming from the stage.
Right.
And then it's really easy and you're not going to lose pushers, going from here to there. Because that can be a struggle when you have a group of people that are willing to help, but they don't know what we need. They don't know what the show's needs are. So you kind of got to make sure that as you're moving as fast as you can, you don't leave stragglers behind, and then all of a sudden, you've left somebody lost who really would love to help you, but they don't know where they're needed. So I just make sure that we're gonna go, to the dressing rooms. We'll go to the wardrobe areas. We're gonna get the things for truck 5, but all that blue stuff, the management boxes, the music boxes, we don't want that yet. That goes on a trailer that's not even here.
Yeah.
We don't have room to back up all the trailers in at once.
So trucks have to come in order then. So
Yeah.
whoever's the teamster of that has to figure out, make sure that that's organized.
Yeah, and that's our head carpenter is going to coordinate that with
Okay.
the lead driver.
Okay.
The drivers work for Clark Distribution, is the company that does all the trucking for us.
Do they do trucking for most road shows or just
They
certain ones?
they don't do all of them. They
Okay.
do. I would say that of all the shows that I've been on, almost all of them have had Clark as the trucking provider, but not always. There's some other companies out there. And with Clark, we're going to have our lead driver consistently is the same person.
Okay.
But the other 4 drivers aren't necessarily. They can be. Sometimes, we do. But they, some of them, I really don't know all the ins and outs, of their job and the way that their organizational structure works. But I do know that, a lot of them are working per the individual job. And, so if they're not pulling one of our trailers, they're working somewhere else. They're independent contractors. But sometimes, we do get people who are consistent Clark drivers. It's just that the only one we can count on always being there is our lead driver.
Right.
And if he's got to go somewhere, then, the Clark is going to let our head carpenter know, or, we're going to get somebody who's going to be given the information. Right. Because that driver is the person who communicates with all the other drivers. A head carpenter tells the lead driver, we need this trailer in here. Well, the lead driver doesn't drive all the trailers, but he's the go-to guy for all the other drivers.
That's fascinating. Yeah. We don't even think about that stuff. But
yeah, like we said, there's a lot of moving parts.
Right. So everything kind of goes back in the same way as it came in.
Yeah.
How long does the loadout go?
The loadout,
what do you need to be done?
The loadout takes approximately half the time, just the way that it's worked out on this show. Fewer than that, I'd say. We've got, say, roughly an 8-hour window to load in the show, and we usually don't take all of that time. I mean, maybe there can be adjustments with the lighting focus or tuning the room or whatever right up to the end.
That happens, you don't know about.
But typically we're within that time frame. So similarly with the loadout, we have a window of time that we can take up to, but we're usually finished before then. Because it would be silly if you only planned for exactly how long it was going to take you, because what if something happened? And that's something that happens. Could be, a truck breaks down or a trailer breaks down, something completely outside of the control of, the people working on the show. You never really know.
Have you ever encountered, and maybe this isn't a question for you, but if something were to go in bringing a show to another theater, something goes wrong and they can't make it in time for an opening? Has that ever happened?
That has happened. If you'd like to hear about I think it happened a couple times to me over the 11 or so years that I've been touring with Broadway shows. Once I want to say that it was known well enough in advance that now I'm remembering. Okay, I've had shows cancel, but the only time that I worked on a show and we didn't make opening night was a really long. It was a really large jump distance-wise. We were coming from Portland.
Okay, Oregon,
Yeah, Portland, Oregon, or maybe we were coming from somewhere in Northern California. No, I think it was Portland, Oregon. And we were going to somewhere in Iowa.
Yeah.
It was
a long trip.
It was really long, and it was in the middle of winter,
and
there was an avalanche and closed the road, and the driver had to go back and then go north almost to Seattle, I think I was told, and then but it wasn't all of the trailers. It was something that happened, I think, because these drivers are driving overnight. In this situation, that's part of the gig, but they're leaving as soon as we fill their trailer
and they go.
And so it was one of the later trailers, that the other ones ahead made it, and then the road got closed, so this trailer didn't make it, and so that that's already it's a long drive, the tight turnaround with the scheduling of opening night being the next day, and the presenter, the people affiliated with the theater who essentially were paying on their end for this to happen, had decided to opening night was going to be for the like the upper tier patrons.
Right.
What would you want to call
Right.
it? So there was a lot of pressure for this show to happen. And I just recall, I was down in the weeds. I was just trying to get the show loaded in.
Yeah.
I wasn't involved in all of these discussions, but I do recall seeing the presenter very angry and, screaming essentially at my head carpenter, who explained.
And this was Kimberly. This was another show.
Oh, this was another show.
So
yeah.
Chad didn't get yelled at.
No. This and I would remember it a lot more clearly if this were Kimberly Akimbo. This was some years ago, but yeah. I mean, the head carpenter was being screamed at for something that was outside of his control, and then he had to step in and defend the driver who showed up when the presenter tried to go up to the truck driver who just went through hell and back to get,
and was a hero in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the driver's fault that that this happened. This was an act of God. It was an inclement weather delay. I mean, what can you do when a road closes and the only other way to go around is, it takes. So what the solution was, instead of just canceling the show because they had promised this performance to these donors of the theater, VIPs, there you go, was the cast couldn't wear their costumes because that was on the trailer that hadn't arrived. They all had matching press t-shirts that they had been given that just had the logo of the show on it. And so they basically went out on stage wearing press t-shirts only for the VIP crowd, not for a general audience, and sang select songs from the show, while the crew quietly continued our load in the background as the late trailer arrived. It was something else. And it's not the sort of thing that, I would like to repeat. And certainly I don't think it's something that would fly under equity rules, potentially. I don't know, but, this...
Well, you have to break some things. Sorry, union. We're fixing this the best we can.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Sorry, union.
And that's the thing is we all did, the best job that we could, and it's unfortunate that things didn't go according to plan. But, people who were losing their temper about it didn't have the right perspective because, and you just can't, it doesn't work. Getting angry when your plans don't go the way you want is not going to fix anything.
So, well, this is great. Thank you. Is there anything that you can think of that you should have said, or you haven't just like popped in your head I didn't talk about?
No. Okay. I mean,
this is absolutely
I don't need to go through the minutia of everything necessarily because but yeah, I basically just do the reverse of what I did on the load-in. So after that first trailer, I help pack up the drum microphones and then help the props team pack up the drum booth. And I do want to say that the last thing that I do is I load that last trailer and I put those big roofing truss pieces on. It's the first thing that we have to put on those trailers. And so it's something that I've found is a little bit easier, that I can take a little bit of ownership. I'm the guy who loads them, I'm the guy who unloads them, and I'm the guy who touches up the paint if they get scuffed up. And when you're the crew swing, you do have to thrive a little bit on the chaos of your life, and you have to be flexible, and you have to enjoy doing new things. But it is important to find certain things that you can keep consistent with, and just to feel a little bit of normalcy in a day and a job that can be completely abnormal most of the time. So for me, getting to be heavily involved with the drum booth setup and getting to work with our drummer, that's been something that has never been, and it's not been an opportunity I've had on a previous show. So, I'm still, it's the thing I love the most about what I do specifically is, the way that I get to learn new things and especially, practice skills that maybe aren't the thing that I'm best at and continue to grow in that way. And, just to keep working in the performing arts. I mean, it's just, it really is. I can't imagine doing anything else.
Why did you get gravitated to this particular career?
I mean, I I would say I randomly fell into it, but I think that there's always been something about it that drew me into it. I was exposed first to the performing arts in the public school system, but my mother was my music teacher at the elementary school I went to, and she was in charge of putting on all the plays and musicals, so I was very involved in them, but I didn't consider it as something to turn into a career, later on in my schooling. And it wasn't until I was in my early 20s and I just got asked to help with a loadout at the local theater in my town. It was a very small nonprofit theater, and the Broadway tours that went through there didn't get to load in their whole sets. They left a lot of stuff on the trailer. Yeah. But when you live in a small town in New Hampshire, getting to see a Broadway show come to your town, you don't think about what didn't fit. Right. You just enjoy it. So I just started as an extra hand, and I think just succeeding at it. I kept getting work doing it, and it was like I said before, it's a niche field, and there's very few people who do it, and it's hard to get into it.
Right.
And usually the way that you get into it is somebody opening that door for you,
right.
and asking you to come in. And so I had a friend who he had become sort of the lighting guy at the theater. It was a very small crew, so it's there were maybe 3 full-time employees that worked underneath the technical director. So maybe one of them was the sound guy, and one was the lighting guy, and one was the fly rail, but we all worked everywhere, And this theater also, by the way, I just want to add, was at the time a hemp house. It still used ropes and sandbags in the 2000s. It's since changed, but that was where I started, I guess, was learning stagecraft in a somewhat traditional and maybe outdated way.
Oh, but that's great.
It was great.
Like, you should learn ballet before you do any other dance.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. What was really cool was, eventually I figured out that I could turn this into a career. And when I started working in modern spaces with modern equipment, I realized that the skills that I had developed still applied. And in fact, it was easier to do things with better gear. But, because I learned on, I didn't have it easy when I started.
Right.
So, but there was also a lot to learn. And that was something, getting into the professional field, that was something very apparent to me, was because I didn't know from an earlier age that I wanted to do this. I didn't go to school for this, and working with a lot of people who did, I always felt like, while maybe I had a little bit of an advantage in the more practical sense of having that experience, there were a lot of gaps in my knowledge that I wanted to fill. And, so that's still something that drives me as I work here. Yeah. But that friend of mine, he was the one who first passed my name along to a touring company after a conversation we'd had about, I'd been freelancing for a while and realized that I was making a career out of this, but I really wanted to make a better career out of it.
And you kind of have to be, it's hard because if you're on your own, how do you have a relationship? I noticed that some crew members have found a relationship and they travel together.
Yes.
And so it's, that's an interesting thing.
I do get asked sometimes by local crew, how did you get into touring? A lot of people would love the opportunity to do it and they just don't know how. And the only answer that I can give them, aside from, well, you just have to get lucky, is, and actually this is a motto that a very good colleague and friend of mine has tattooed on his arm, which is, preparation makes its own luck. Now, whether or not you believe that, I will say that no matter how lucky you are, no opportunity will work out for you if you are not ready to pursue it.
Right.
And, at the time that I had this conversation with my friend who pulled me up the ladder with him, he said, yeah, I can give your name to the right people, but if you get an opportunity, you may need to drop everything and go take it. And at the time, I was working freelance, so I didn't have an employer that I needed to inform. I didn't have a relationship, with a significant other, and my housing situation was was not contracted. I was actually renting a room in a house that belonged to a friend of mine, and therefore just helping my friend pay her mortgage. But it was easy enough, to get out of that. So that was really it, is I had nothing tying me, to my physical location. And when the opportunity came, absolutely, it was, somebody who had been trained for a position on a tour had to leave, and they needed somebody immediately. 24 hours after that phone call, I was in South Dakota, learning how to call the spotlight cues and run my own spotlight for this show. That was my first tour, and my first week on the road was a week of one-offs, one-night engagements, where you load in, do the show, and load out throughout the Midwest, including a 2-show one-nighter. We started loading at 5 a.m. We had a matinee, we had an evening show, and we had a loadout, and we went to the next place. I didn't know any differently that this wasn't how it went.
Things, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And listen, it's only gotten better since there. Yeah. But I just want to say that it all happened because somebody believed in me and helped me get to where I could then demonstrate my own capability and get myself the rest of the way. So
then you had to join the union, right?
Absolutely. And that really changed things, because I was freelancing in the Boston area, and I wasn't a part of the union, and I'd heard it was about 50-50 in terms of the work that was available, and it seemed like not a given that joining the union was worth it in terms of the dues versus what opportunities you were going to get from it. But that completely changed when I started doing the Broadway tours, because, they, just due to the way that it works, the union doesn't deny anybody's entry into the union by being hired by these companies. The only requirement is that they join the union. Okay. The difference is that instead of belonging to a local chapter, with a number that you're probably used to seeing, or like here Toronto, local 58, I belong to a local called ACT, which is Associated Crafts and Technicians, and that is not tied to a geographic location, even though it's called a local. It's just under the umbrella of the international. So my dues don't go to a local chapter. My dues go directly to the international. And ACT was founded around the time that moving light technology started being used more prominently in touring productions. And there was a need for tours to have people who were experts in maintaining this new technology that were not traditional stagehands or practitioners of traditional stagecraft. So this category was created for them. And then there's been a lot of discussion since then that I've only, learned since I joined about how that has evolved and the way that, people are brought into the international. Now, people who come up through the local system, typically they have to start off as an apprentice. There's a whole process that the local is responsible for to make sure that their members are trained. And this is all, to take pride and ownership in the work that we do. We want to be the best at what we do, and we want people to want to hire union labor, and so there's a real sense of, trying to help each other get better. But from time to time you encounter people who don't want to do that. They want to see people who don't have the skills that they think they should have and just tear them down instead, and denigrate the fact that, they didn't learn about all of the history and the traditions, and they don't know how good they have it. They don't know what we had to fight for to get, IATSE has a long and proud history. And, and I appreciate that to a certain extent, that there are people who are maybe, handed a union membership card in this process now without really understanding everything that means. And that's all, I just think that it's incumbent upon us as fellow brothers and sisters to not to tear each other down and just to educate and,
Yeah.
and listen, I travel around and I've only been doing this for so long, and I work with people who have been doing this for longer than I've been alive. And, that doesn't always mean that they're the best at it. So, we're all in a position to teach, and we're all in a position to learn.
Right.
And, we have a responsibility to each other to do both.
Yeah. Right on, brother. All right.